All right, so can you tell me a little bit about what you know about the Berlin Wall and how it affected the Cold War?
Sure. Well, the Berlin Wall was constructed, it kept Eastern and Western Berlin separate. The irony being the Soviet Union, the USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, they kept, their claim was that it kept the Westerners out, but it was really designed to keep the communist portion from entering into Western Berlin. And Western Berlin became sort of a symbol of freedom, and it was famous because a lot of people don't realize that the city itself was enveloped. So Western Berlin was liberated by the Western Allies, the United States, France, Great Britain, etc., etc. And then they withdrew at the end of World War II, but the Soviet Union didn't withdraw their troops. They kept them there. But the Western Allies stayed within Western, or they hung on to West Berlin, I believe, and the Soviet Union put a blockade around it, thinking they would starve them out. And it was one of the famous, it's almost like a D-Day invasion. It was the airlift. So for days on end, the Allies did aerial drops over West Berlin to drop in food and basic supplies to keep the people there alive. So it was symbolic because it was the sign that officially a new war had begun, and it was a Cold War because it was, if it went hot, that was potentially a high risk factor for it becoming a nuclear or atomic war, depending on what kind of bomb they had. And then it all came crashing down. I can't remember, I think the Soviet Union collapsed in '91, and I think the wall, I want to say my dates might be off, but I think the wall was, for some reason or another, 1989 is sticking in my head. And then maybe it was 91, but 91 I think was the fall of the Soviet Union. And then the wall, of course, was ripped down, and parts of it people hung on to, and eventually you could buy, became sort of a souvenir, and you could buy parts of the wall as a symbol of the Cold War and a piece of history.
All right, so my second question, can you tell me a little bit how the Berlin Wall, about how it has, like what effects it has on like the situation today, like the stance that it has on today?
Well, it's interesting. It seems as though that today there are a lot of people that have forgotten their history, because the Soviet Union, the heart of the Soviet Union was Russia. And, people also forget that at the outset of World War II, Russia, Tsarist, no, it wasn't Tsarist, Russia, they fell in World War I. But Russia was aligned with the Third Reich. They were aligned with Russia, Germany. And they signed a non-aggression pact, and then cooperatively or in tandem, they invaded Eastern and Western Poland. And so at the outset of the war, Russia wasn't an ally, and it became sort of an enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of a deal, because Operation Barbarossa, I think, or something of that nature, that was Germany betrayed Russia because they wanted their natural resources, mineral deposits and oil, and so they invaded, and that became, of course, the two-front war that was demise of Germany, because they couldn't maintain that. Their losses were so significant. I think they lost almost 1 million troops in the Battle of Stalingrad. But once Germany attacked Russia, Russia then became part officially of the Allies. But they were initially not an ally, and it was even before the end of World War II I think a lot of people forecast not only the end of Germany as we knew it, the Third Reich, so to speak, but also the advent of a new kind of conflict between Russia and the Western world, essentially. The Allied countries, the original Allied countries in World War II. And that's exactly what took place. How did it affect us today? Well, it's shaped our foreign policy, I think, for a long, long time. And then, the Cold War was the driving force. It's why, when Sputnik flew in 1957, that was the first aerial or space, the first satellite in space. The United States dumped tons of money into science and education. You might say that was the advent of what is the current math technology? What do they call it? There's an acronym for that. Can't remember. It should be, but anyway. But it seems today that Russia as a historical enemy, we've sort of lost sight of that. There's a lot of people, I think, within the United States that don't, using the current Ukrainian conflict, don't necessarily support providing aid with Ukraine, and perhaps see Russia as, Ukraine as being a part of Russia. But they have been an ally or an enemy throughout the whole Cold War, and then I would say beyond. And there's a lot of people today that would say that the Cold War never really ended. Russia just called a timeout for a while. But the wall today is and has been ever since it was torn down as a symbol, as a victory, as a rallying cry for the world, but really it was the reunification of Germany. But there are still fundamental differences. You can look at a lot of demographics, politics, other things, voting trends within the current boundaries of Germany, and you can still see the legacy, I think, in many ways, of the Soviet control of Eastern Germany. The Stasi, the legacy, the Stasi were the East German police, S-T-A-S-I. They were ruthless.
All right, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.